another OUinsider.com podcast. I'm RJ Young. I'm joined by OUI staff writer Colin Kennedy. Colin, what's going on, man?
Man, we got football, baby. We got a lot to talk about today. I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a fun show because we got a fun weekend coming up.
Yeah, man, it feels like the first full weekend of football, even as it's not, right? Like, I was actually thinking about this earlier in the week. We are going to have a week 7 where a top 5 team, at least one, has not played football, and others will have played as many as 6 games. And that's even before we begin to talk about losing more than 30 games, I believe now. No, we played 29 and we've lost like 18, like have been postponed or canceled. And yet, I'm really excited for this SEC only schedule. I'm really excited for this Big 12 schedule. And I'm really excited to see whether or not Alex Grinch's defense shows up against Kansas State. I know that's wild to talk about, but the last time that Alex Grinch's defense played against Kansas State, they gave up 48 points to Skylar Thompson and the Wildcats. And now that the Wildcats are traveling to Norman following a bye week for Oklahoma and obviously a bye week for Kansas State, I want to see if they can put up another goose egg, man. Like I wrote a bit about this earlier in the week. This is going to be the first opportunity they really have since 2015 to put together back-to-back shutouts. And the last time that they did that at Oklahoma was 2009. Now, interestingly enough, that season had 3 shutouts, and that team went 8-5. So I'm trying to put that together, right? I'm trying to make this all make sense. So what is your understanding of how Alex Grinch's defense looks as it prepares for Skylar Thompson, Deuce Vaughn, Harry Trotter, Briley Moore, and the like?
Yeah, man, I'm fascinated by this matchup because obviously you mentioned that Alex Grinch didn't do so hot last time he faced the Wildcats. Now, that being said, I mean, that was an incredible atmosphere. It was a well-thought-out game plan. But, I mean, we'll dive into this. Both teams are kind of starting from scratch. And when you talk about this matchup, OU's defense versus Kansas State's offense, I obviously see, okay, Skylar Thompson is back at quarterback. They have Malik Knowles at wide receiver, a guy who I think is very good, just needs the football a little bit more. But, I mean, K-State's starting basically brand new on the offensive line. Josh Rivas is basically the one guy up there that had experience against Oklahoma a season ago. But outside of that, I mean, they're putting in basically 5 new guys up front. And for Kansas State, especially when you talk about that offensive system, that's not good news. And then when you look at Oklahoma, I mean, the defensive line depth concerns, well touched on. But Isaiah Thomas seemingly ready to step up into that role. Perrion Winfrey, obviously, there as another role player as well. But I think I go into this game with a little bit of optimism for much better statistics when it comes to Grinch and his scheme because, like I mentioned, I mean, this Kansas State offense is nowhere near what it was a season ago. And then, of course, you factor in the whole COVID concerns. It just could get a little bit ugly. And so I'm very encouraged for what Alex Grinch might be able to put together this weekend. It's just really going to come down to a matter of who is ready to step up into some of those roles that were vacated from his primary leaders a season ago.
Absolutely. We're going to see a second game without Ronnie Perkins and without Trajan Bridges and Ramondre Stevenson. Lincoln Riley touched on this a little bit when we were talking with him earlier this week about what he expects in the way of suspensions, and I want to get to that. But I bring that point up because it's been musical chairs on the defensive line for Grinch, with Isaiah Thomas moving to defensive tackle after playing defensive end last year. You're really expecting guys like Corey Robertson to be back into the fold, as well as Marcus Stripling, who I absolutely adore as a pass rusher. He has what I thought was the fastest get-off I've seen from a dude weighing 260 pounds in some time. And, of course, we're going to watch LaRon Stokes and see what he's able to provide as well. Nick Benito and John Michael Terry, I think, are going to have big roles in this game, too, as Kansas State likes to go with some big personnel, and they're probably going to try to run the football even more than they pass it, even with that new offensive line. But I would ask you this question. Do you think that this is a prove-it game for Brian Asamoah? Because after the way he played against Missouri State, taking over that will linebacker position and really playing it in the same way that Kenneth Murray Jr. was allowed to play it last year, do you think this is a prove-it and perhaps a star turn for the former tailback in high school?
I love the question, and I'm glad that you brought it up. I would definitely be concerned if Brian Asamoah isn't stuffing the stat sheet on Saturday. And I think, like I mentioned, when you talk about Kansas State and that basically brand new offensive line, then they're bringing in Harry Trotter as basically that veteran running back for K-State. Deuce Vaughn is going to be shifty. He might be a little bit more difficult to handle, but at the same time, I mean, these are guys that Brian Asamoah should be quite clearly better than. And so if he isn't that dude against, number one, an offensive system that favors linebacker tackles, and number two, a K-State offense that's really starting from scratch in a number of different positions, especially in the box, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm going to be extremely concerned, but it would definitely be something I raise my eyebrow at. So I hope to see Osamoa really take that next step. I think this is the perfect platform to provide for him. I think when you talk about being at home and all these favorable matchups for him, and the fact that he's basically going to be allowed to run around and just simply make plays without having to think too much because Deshaun White is going to be there as sort of the responsibility factor. Yeah, I'm hoping to see Brian Asamoah really have a standout performance on Saturday. And if he doesn't, I mean, when is it going to come, you know?
I think we have some time to wait for him to mature, and I think he's going to get more opportunities. If anything, I would love to see guys like Jamal Morris and Robert Barnes get some run at those linebacker positions. If no other reason, then I just want to see him play it, right? It's an interesting thought to drop down your strong safeties to be inside linebackers, right? Which is what Delarian Turner-Yell turned out to be, is basically a real box safety, which is to say a slender linebacker, maybe an overgrown strong safety. On the other side of the ball, the question is, can Spencer Rattler do it again, right? I talked with some Kansas State folks earlier this week, and I want to get into what you learned from Tim Fitzgerald at Go PowerCat about the defensive back situation at Kansas State. Number one, they didn't play very well against an Arkansas State team that had their way with them with over 300 yards passing. And, of course, Rashad Paul and Jonathan Adams both were just working K-State defensive backs. And then you add to that, it's Spencer Rattler back there who has shown the goods, along with Charleston Rambo, Marvin Mims, who is apparently a sub 4.4 guy, along with guys like Austin Stogner. It feels like Oklahoma should be able to put up 50 if they want to. But again, it's a real step up in competition, not just because it's FCS to FBS, but because it is a 1-10 team with a new head coach to a national champion winning head coach with like 5 rings who knows how to scheme, and they know how to put together coverages that could, I think, confuse Rattler. So what's your feel on how the offense is going to attack the defense?